Welcome to Catastrophes. This is a podcast about disasters, why disasters happen, and the factors that make them happen. We discuss the underlying vulnerabilities within each of our cities, particularly looking at the reasons why disasters happen and why some vulnerabilities and some of the problems within our cities, countries, and societies can actually make a disaster worse. My name is Brady Podlowski. I am your host, and today we have a really interesting episode about urban heat waves, particularly looking at Vancouver. I am joined by my guest, Sarah Hunn, who is a senior resilience officer for the City of Vancouver, and we really got to talking about how some small changes, some small projects can go a long way in heat waves. So I'm thrilled to be able to bring you this episode. It was a really great conversation, and I hope you enjoy. And before we get into it, the intent of exploring heat waves and other disasters is not to demean or diminish the experiences of people who are facing these traumatic, silent, and deadly disasters, specifically these heat waves, but rather explore, question, critique, and ask why they happen, and ask how we can do better in the future. And with that, let's begin. Welcome, Sarah, to Catastrophes, the podcast about disasters. I am so thankful that you are here today to talk about Vancouver heat waves and what you guys are doing about heat waves, because this is the third and final part of our series, The Future of Summers. And Sarah, I'm glad you're here. Before you speak and tell us all about yourself, I want to introduce the audience to you. So you are a senior resilience specialist with the City of Vancouver, where you are super passionate about working with communities to address sudden shocks and everyday stresses. And what I thought about is really cool about your role is you have a couple projects that I'm going to ask you about in a few minutes. But number one, you're implementing the neighborhood focus action for resilient Vancouver strategies. And that includes resilient neighborhood program, which I want to ask you about. But before we get to that, you began as a volunteer and you have over a decade of emergency management experience where you worked in the City of Victoria, City of Richmond, and you've always been a part of public education, community resilience, making you the perfect person for today's episode. So welcome, Sarah. Welcome.
Thanks, Brady. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you today about community resilience and heat waves.
So, I guess before we even get into anything Vancouver related, tell me about what you're working on right now. Like, it sounds really interesting to me.
Yeah. So as you said, I run what's called Resilient Neighborhoods program. This started a while ago, and it's been through a couple iterations due to, sourcing and capacity, staffing, and things like that. But in its current iteration, it's really about the biggest part of our focus is around extreme heat and wildfire smoke, because that's what we have funding for currently. So we have a number of partners. They're predominantly our neighborhood houses around the city, as well as a couple of other place-based like community organizations that we give a tiny little bit of money to. We don't have a very big budget, but we give them a little bit of money, and then they're able to implement different resilient building activities and responses in their community. And really, the whole idea around it is that community organizations and community itself know best how to help their people. Vancouver is so diverse, with um, what languages people speak, the needs that people have, where even just where in the city that they are have different needs, the type of building that you live in, how connected or not you are to your community, so many different needs. And for us as a city to be able to respond to all of those individual needs is pretty much impossible. And it's also it's not something that there are certain people that don't want that help from the government, right? They want it from their community, or they trust, there's more trust in different levels, right? So the whole idea around the program is that people go to the places and the people that they trust. And so neighborhood houses are are great examples of that. And they're already doing a lot of this work. They already do resilience work around connecting people and connecting people to resources and building like a sense of community if you're using it in that sense of the word. And we just give them a little bit more information or a little bit of guidance almost, I would say, and support them or connect them to other resources and hear what their ideas are and try to foster those. So yeah, we have about a dozen of those organizations. And then on our larger, what we're calling now our amplifier network, I think we have over 60 organizations that we are connected to at the city. And again, they're different language speaking, different cultural community groups that help different people with different types of disabilities or different religions. Yeah, people are connected through different ways, and so yeah, we have this larger amplifier network that we kind of push information to, with the hope that they're then passing that information on to their own networks. So
Brilliant.
yeah, yeah,
If I could comment, I mean, first of all, I love anything that is locally driven because that's how it's sustainable.
totally.
Like
Yes,
it's somebody from Ontario saying to somebody in Vancouver, like, "Hey, keep building resilience, but just do it any way you want. Here's the money." It's like, it doesn't necessarily work like that.
mm-hmm.
Whereas you actually see some of the tangible benefits, and you actually talk to these people, and you're there too as well, right? So I
Totally.
do love that, and
Yeah, and especially at this scale, like you said in
mm,
my bio, I used to work for City Victoria and I worked for City of Richmond. And in those places, slightly smaller cities, I was able personally to kind of more connect with community members and do it a little bit more personally rather than going through community organizations. But with a city the size of Vancouver, I cannot personally connect
yeah,
with or personally educate or personally connect, 700,000 people or whatever our population is right now. So
big number, yeah.
yeah, and so it's not sustainable. But these institutions and these community organizations, they exist, and they're doing this work. And so how can we, yeah, support them in different ways, and
Yeah, and
they
empower
keep
them.
doing
That's
it.
I think that's the right
Exactly,
way
it's
to
a
say it.
lot more sustainable for everyone, I think. Yeah.
I love that. So today we are going to talk about heat waves and Canada. I mean, so geographically wide dispersed. I thought it'd be really interesting. We should probably have a definition for heat waves, but kind of interesting. Canada does not have a separate definition or threshold for heat waves because we're so wide. So when I was doing a little bit of research for just any sort of definition, I came across Quebec's, which is quite interesting. For their regional thresholds, for 3 days, they have to have a temperature which is between 31 to 33 degrees and a minimum temperature above 16 to 20 for it to be considered a heat wave. So really interesting, the last part, and something we talked about on last episode is this nighttime temperature phenomenon of warmer temperatures during the night. Our bodies are intended to be cooling down during the night, but really can't. And can you imagine sleeping in 16 to 20-degree weather in a really old stone brick building?
I
I
don't need to imagine it because yes, I have. But
I
yeah,
think
even in BC, we don't have a standard definition just for BC. Different regions have different numbers because yeah, as you've said, and even those numbers and definitions have been tweaked and are
yeah,
changing since 2021, but before that as well, because of the science that comes out. And yeah, just how our adaptation or not, as the case may be, as we
mhm,
see here, especially in the Lower Mainland and on the island too, when we're not. Our physical bodies are not adapted to it. Our buildings are not adapted to it, and none of our infrastructure is adapted to it. Yeah.
totally. This is going to be an interesting conversation overall because I really want to center it around, well, one, Vancouver, and we'll talk about Vancouver in a minute, but the heat dome that you folks experienced in 2021. Well, just taking a step back, if we look at most of Western Canada in 2021, there was temperatures above 20 degrees for however long. But then in communities like Lytton, which then had a wildfire, they had 49-degree heat. I haven't actually been in 49-degree heat either. So,
Yeah, I actually grew up in Arizona. So, yeah, I
oh,
grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, where it's very hot all the time. If anyone's visited Arizona, yeah, so hot all the time, regularly above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, regularly getting to just extreme horrible temperatures. But it we had air conditioning, and
mm,
everyone I knew had air conditioning, and all the shops have air conditioning, and there's lots of man-made shade. There's not a lot of trees, but there's a lot of man-made shade. There's a lot of like misting stations as you're coming out of stores and stuff. Everywhere you go inside is super cool, to the point where you're like that first second when you leave the air conditioner, you're like, oh, this is so nice. But yeah, I remember in 2021, all my Arizona friends, like they heard about this heat dome. It was happening in Washington and in parts
mhm,
of the states as well. So my Arizona friend were like, what is this? Like, why is everyone talking about like this is not that hot?
yeah.
And I said, hardly anyone here has air conditioning. And
Mm,
they lost their minds. They're like, how is that even possible? Like, as I said, I grew up in Arizona. Yes, it's hot. I did not experience heat stroke or like heat exhaustion until I moved to Canada.
wow.
So it's really about what your body is, not even what your body is used to, because the first time I experienced heat exhaustion was a summer I came to Canada. I was living in Arizona. I was in Canada for a summer. I lived on the third floor. I slept on the third floor of a townhouse without air conditioning in Penticton,
Mm,
which is a lot warmer than Vancouver.
oh,
And yeah, could not cool down at night. Did not cool down at night. My body just could not handle it. And I got fairly ill, pretty sick. It was not a fun experience.
no.
Um, and people are like, how is that possible? You're from Arizona. And it's like, no, this like the buildings are not built to handle this. And if you don't have air conditioning, if you don't have mechanical cooling, you can get very sick. Yeah.
Well, and so I mean, I'm in Edmonton, and I used to live in a condo, and the condo is from 1964. So it's really good at insulating heat. And in the summer of 2023, it was 35 degrees here. And my wife was a remote worker at the time. We both, she was in the office, I was in the other office, and it was 39 degrees inside of our condo. We literally had to put our feet in ice buckets,
Yeah.
and she ended up getting heat stroke
Yeah.
still. Like it, at that point, when you don't have that centralized air conditioning or just any
No.
sort of like cooling mechanism, and your buildings conserve heat. It's
Yeah, our buildings are made to stay warm,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
that's why they were built, or that's how they were built,
yeah,
and yeah, so it's not like an individual failure.
yeah,
I mean, no disaster is, it's our systems and it's our, yeah, the way that it's been built, like, that's like the yeah, no natural disasters, which I know you know about and talk about a lot, like
oh yeah,
like it's yeah, the same temperature in other places, and like Sarah was talking about in the last episode of Australians being like that's not that hot, in other places, but it's like what you're used to, what your systems are made, and even like a lot of cultural things, yeah, as well, of
absolutely.
like yeah, in Arizona the outside workers start work at 6 in the morning and then they're done
Hmm.
at 2. They're not working through the hottest parts of the day, and
Exactly.
even schools as well are earlier, and our summer vacation was different. Like
Hmm.
there's a lot of change, like cultural and societal changes, that exist in hot places that don't exist here.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
one additional one that just came to mind in Saudi Arabia for the golf industry. I used to be in the golf industry, and they actually have tea times from 4 a.m. to they stop allowing people on the course after 10 a.m.
Yeah.
4 to 10, and then they reopen 3:30 to about 7
Yeah,
because
at night.
it's 50
Yeah,
degrees,
it's just ridiculous. Yeah.
from noon to 3, so
Yeah.
you can't golf. It's
Yeah.
just not possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Let's move to Vancouver.
Yes.
I'd love to hear more. First, let's just talk about the context of Vancouver. I mean, like,
Mhm.
um, So there's like 12 different municipalities in Vancouver. So maybe just quickly run me through which one you're a part of.
Yeah, so great question. Yeah, the politics here is tricky. So yeah, so I work for the City of Vancouver, so
Right.
Vancouver proper, I guess. Yeah, we are part of the Greater Vancouver Regional District. Yeah, there are a bunch of other municipalities near us as well, which are dealing with similar challenges, obviously.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's mandated from the provincial level, all right, and the federal level, that every municipality has to have their own emergency plan and their own emergency management. And so that's the division that I'm in. I'm in emergency management. So we do some work, across the region, and obviously something like heat as an emergency we get our information from the health authority. So Vancouver Coastal Health is our health authority. Wow, I don't know why that's so hard to say. Um, but uh, yeah, they're the ones that are doing the science and telling us, who's most at risk,
Yeah.
and giving the information about how to stay safe and actions, and like really from that health perspective.
Oh, cool.
um, but then cities take that guidance and use it to enact our plans and our responses to something like heat. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. That's like really good context. There's the
Ooh.
City of Vancouver. So clearly, and I mean, I could probably get a better map, but that's the District of Vancouver or
Yeah,
the
city. Yeah, city.
City of Vancouver, and then there's, the other ones. So I guess if I could first ask, are you coordinating with the other districts to have an overall resilience plan, or is it more so you're working individually?
So yeah, it depends what you're talking about. So in
Mhm.
BC, we have BC HARS, which is the British Columbia Heat Alert Response System.
I
I
think
might
that's
need
right.
to look that out. I think that's what that is. Um, so it's a provincially mandated in terms of um, standards of, what is a heat alert or a heat warning versus what's an extreme heat emergency, as well as some guidance about, what you should do in those different scenarios,
Mm,
and like what the province, like roles and responsibilities, kind of what would happen if those levels are triggered, what's paid for by so our ministry, EMCR, the Emergency Management and Climate Readiness Ministry, like pays back municipalities for response for any emergency, but
right.
obviously heat is in there. So it kind of like covers that kind of stuff of like
Mm,
what you should do. I think there's maybe some templates and stuff, but it also is kind of up to the municipality themselves, or the local government or First Nation, of what they want to do at different
mm,
levels based on their own risk. So for
cool.
instance, I know of some um, local authorities who will only activate cooling centers in what is now known as an extreme heat emergency.
Mm,
That terminology did not exist when the heat dome in 2021 happened, but if it happened today,
wow.
that's what that would be called. So yeah, those are very rare, very extreme events, versus we have something what's called a heat warning, which is higher than normal temperatures, and can be a risk for especially vulnerable populations.
Mm,
And those we can have like one or two a year. So
right.
it's like not as extreme. So some municipalities like won't activate or they'll have, different stages of what they'll activate at certain times, right? So that isn't something that is mandated. It is something that we talk about at a regional level, like, hey, what are you doing? And what are you working on?
Yeah.
And then in terms of the work that I'm doing around the resilience like community resilience work specifically, it's so hyper local that it's just within Vancouver. So we are working with some organizations that might have reach in other places. So especially some of our larger,
Mm,
like United Way and like
yeah,
Salvation
yeah,
Army and um, like Success and like migrant workers and yeah, Yarrow, some other places that obviously their reach is beyond Vancouver. But we what I'm working on is very yeah like hyper local to Vancouver, and I like happy to share happy to share that stuff and happy to share kind of like the program information and that kind of stuff with other organizations, which we have done.
cool.
But otherwise, yeah, so it's kind of yeah different levels working on different stuff, I guess.
That's interesting. So when we just talk about the city of Vancouver, can maybe you go into the nuance of what some of the vulnerabilities are in Vancouver and maybe who is vulnerable?
So if we're talking about heat, everyone, everyone's vulnerable to heat, especially anyone that doesn't have a way to cool themselves down. Anyone who does not have
Mm,
mechanical cooling is vulnerable to heat. Um, so even just having mechanical cooling eliminates a lot of vulnerability.
mhm,
But obviously, there's beyond that, other people or other demographics that are more at risk than others. And those were identified in the coroner's report from the 2021 heat dome, as well as, yeah, other work from our health authorities. And the big one for heat is people who live alone. So
mm,
isolated seniors or people with other vulnerabilities, especially those where if they have like mobility challenges or disabilities where either it's hard to get around or some disabilities mean that you cannot feel
mm,
heat and you cannot regulate your own body temperature. Those folks are more at risk. So again, especially if they live alone or don't have a support system. Yeah, older adults, other, yeah, people with other like complex health issues, things like that. But even things like people, outdoor workers, people who are
mm,
pregnant, young children. So it's not specific to Vancouver. These are pretty common across the board, I would say. But definitely the yeah folks who live alone are what we saw, especially yeah with other like disabilities or other complex health issues are what we saw for the 2020 heat dome of
yeah.
those who are most vulnerable. Yeah.
And that's interesting, the alone component, especially because it's one of those things where, if I am a 20-year-old living alone, I might go, It's not that bad. It's just heat. I've been through this before." Whereas, you compare it to a senior who's living alone who might not have people checking on them. It's
Hmm.
totally different story because
Exactly. And it's one of those things where it's like with heat, by the time you realize that you need help,
mm,
it's harder to get it,
yes.
right? So unless
Yeah.
someone's actively checking on you and calling up on you to see how you're doing, because it does impair your
Right?
cognitive function,
Yeah.
and especially if you're sitting down and you think like, oh, I'm getting kind of dizzy. And now I have to get up and go somewhere or get up and cool myself down. Like that's difficult.
Yeah.
Or yeah, or like I said, yeah, there's some people that cannot regulate their own body temperature or they can't feel if they're too hot. So that obviously makes it even more challenging
Yeah, for
to
sure.
know where you're at and try and regulate that.
Yeah, well, I mean, well said. Well, like you covered a lot of those good points. So when we talk about resilience, and it's in your job title, so hopefully you have a good answer for me. But what is resilience to you, and how does it look in the face of heat waves and the heat dome?
Really good question. And yeah, I always think like this is in my job title. I should I should be better able to explain this. No, but community resilience, because I think there's different types of resilience.
Mm,
and people talk about personal resilience, but I think in this context and the context of my position, my job,
Yeah.
it's really about community resilience. And I would say that that is about a community's ability to adapt, respond,
Mm.
and I would say even thrive in the face of shocks and stresses.
Nice.
And so heat being one of them, being it can be with climate change is both a shock and a stressor because
Mm.
it's getting progressively worse, but then it is also causing these acute events like the heat dome or like other extreme heat events. And so, in the context of that, it's about the community's ability um, to respond to heat. And like I said,
Mm.
isolated folks who are isolated, therefore not connected to community, are the ones who can be most vulnerable. And that's not just in Vancouver. That's everywhere. That Eric Kleinenberg in his reports of the Chicago heat wave long time ago, it was the exact same
1994.
thing.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was the exact same thing. It was
Mhm.
people that died alone, in their homes, inside. That that was the problem, and a lack of social infrastructure and a lack of community resilience was really highlighted in that event, as well as here in BC.
So are you saying that if we all just get to know each other just a little bit more, we're actually that much more resilient?
Yes, 100%. That's basically my job is if everyone just knew everyone, it'd be so much easier. And yeah, and that's too, it's as I said in my definition, I'm pretty sure I said this about shocks and stresses.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times people think about these events or the work that I do specifically around like earthquake. Like in BC, people
Mhm.
are obsessed with the earthquake, and
Yeah.
which I think they should
Cascadia.
be,
Yeah.
as as you should. But kind of a very if when they think about emergency preparedness, they think yes, earthquake. This is what I got to do.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, what about a power outage? What
Mhm.
about, like a small thing that's happening or a building fire or a bigger thing, like a weather event or, whatever it is. It's all the same. It's all about knowing who your neighbors are, knowing who needs help and how to help them.
Mhm.
And it's something that we see happen naturally
Mhm.
in more physical events like floods and earthquakes and stuff around the world. But heat has often been described as the silent killer, because it's not so physical. COVID was very similar in that you can't see it. There isn't obvious physical damage that the community needs to come together and clean up and respond to and deal with that we see in a lot of other events. But it's still the same principles can and do happen with heat. Checking on people saves lives, and knowing, as I said, like knowing who your neighbors are, knowing who needs help and how to help them, knowing all of that before the emergency happens is the key.
It's great.
And knowing, uh, as I was saying earlier on, about our work specifically with like community organizations. So for
Mhm.
them to know kind of how they can help their folks or establishing themselves as places of trust and places of help during emergencies,
Totally.
which again, it happens spontaneously a lot, but the more that we can work ahead of time to increase that resilience, it's just going to make it a lot easier for everyone.
I particularly love that last part. It makes me think of a case study. I forget where it was out of, but it was saying, well, any sort of minor shock or minor stress where like a snowstorm, a blizzard, an ice storm, even a little bit of heat, people go to where they know, or people go to
Mhm.
the places they know. And
Mhm.
so in this case study, it was talking about the local church, mosque, and synagogue all
Mhm.
opened their doors for everybody.
Mhm.
because, well, one, it was sometimes the only place to become cool, but
Yeah.
people went there because they
Mhm.
knew it was going to be open. They knew it was going to have something for them, and also that connection. So I
Yeah,
really like I like that
totally.
point quite a bit.
Yes, yes.
So moving on to our 2021 event, the Heat Dome in Vancouver. Um, one of, I'd say, Vancouver's like one of their worst disasters, I think, in like the last 100 years, if I could say. So, some of the estimates were that there's approximately 619 deaths, which were attributed to extreme heat, which occurred within 1 week. But then we know many of those residents died largely due to being stuck indoors for private residents. They were isolated,
Mhm.
just kind of like you said. So when we think about the 2021 heat dome, what are the lessons for the city? Is there one that really sticks out for you, or
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think those numbers that you quoted was for all of BC, not just Vancouver, but Vancouver was definitely, I would say, disproportionately impact just due to our population.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I didn't work for the city of Vancouver at the time of the heat dome. Um, but this was the same
yeah,
across the province. Many cities, including City of Vancouver, had a heat plan. So the city's heat plan, I believe, is from 2010,
mm,
which was written after the 2009 heat wave,
mhm,
and similar to a lot of local authorities across the province. So there was a plan, but the best practices or thinking that was in those plans was around centralized cooling facilities, so
mm,
cooling centers. And this is something that I've even heard a lot of since then, since 2021, is like, oh, we need more cooling centers, and that being like
mm.
the number one solution for
Interesting. Yeah.
heat, which I find very interesting, given the results of the coroner's report and
Mhm,
our learnings from 2021, is that is not enough, and
mm,
that's not it doesn't help the folks who are most vulnerable.
yeah,
And we need to be able to help people cool in place. So cooling in place really, I think, was the big learning. So as I said, I didn't work for the city in 2021, but after the heat dome, staff from my division, emergency management, and some other folks did engagement with people with lived experience to find out about their experiences, and it really was about like, well, we can't get to a cooling
yeah,
center, or I can walk there, but there's no trees on the walk there, or there's a bus, but it only goes once an hour or I have to wait outside for a bus to come, and then it's too hot, and I'm too hot by the time I get there, or I go to a cooling center and there's nothing to do there. And
yeah.
which is very true. That's a huge thing.
Totally.
Cooling centers are just, I mean, the libraries are great. I love a library. A lot to do in a library, but otherwise it's like a community center. And
Mhm,
some of them, it's not even the whole center, so it's a room with some chairs in it, right? So I think this is, don't quote me on this is very
mm,
anecdotal, but uh, a large population of people that I see using cooling centers are people who work remotely, who don't
mm,
have cooling at home, and that go to places to use Wi-Fi and
yeah,
air conditioning, right? But there's not a place to lie down.
mhm,
There's not activities. It's not necessarily like a fun or welcoming. Like if they're welcoming, like community centers are
yeah,
welcoming. Not try not to bash on community centers. They're great,
mhm,
but it's they to for cooling centers to be effective, or for you to get a good experience from a cooling center, you have to be there for several hours.
wow,
It's not just like a let me pop in for a couple minutes, which is fine when you're already out and about. Like I think cooling centers are great for that. You're out and about, and you're like, wow, I'm getting pretty hot. I need to cool down. But if you are too hot in your home to then go to a cooling, you need to stay there for several hours.
Wow.
And that is just not possible for folks who have, yeah, especially who have disabilities, both
Yeah.
to get there, but then also when they're staying there. They have, people have different sensory needs and things like that, which aren't always accommodated. So, yeah, people, and also just so much more comfortable in their own home. So
Mhm.
yeah, so I think that's the big learning is
Brilliant.
people need to cool in place. And what are some things that we can do to help make that happen is kind
Tell
of
me
the big
about them.
question. That's
Yeah.
yes. So there's a few things that the city's been doing since 2021. So one is cooling kits. So these were kind of invented with Vancouver Coastal Health.
Oh,
The
cool.
city asked them like, what should we put in these kits? And it's basically a plastic tub that has like a water bottle, a spray bottle, like some towels, some
Mm,
cooling gels that you can put
cooling
in the
towels.
freezer,
Yep. Oh, yeah.
some information, things like that. So the idea, and then the tub itself, you can like fill with water to put limbs in to cool down.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, so the idea is that they're low cost, um, like personal cooling um, things. So the city has been handing out those out through our neighborhood partners. So through the Resilience Neighborhoods program, we kind of average about like 1,500 of those a year.
Wow.
So I think we've done around 6,000 of them since the program started. And so yeah, those are ways, and then they're given out through our partners through their own programming, so like seniors programming, or so a lot of them do like grocery drop off or ride share things, and so they're
Mhm.
like, by the way, here's this as well, or they just have them at their our facilities and hand them out, or they do special, yeah, everyone kind of has different um ways in which they hand those out, but that's a big one. um and then another is, yeah, as I talked briefly about at the beginning about some of our granting programs for
Mm,
our Resilient Neighborhoods program. And so they, yeah, do different programs, both outreach and in reach. So work at their centers to make their centers. A lot of them don't have mechanical cooling.
mm,
So, working with that, working to do, like I said, like cooling centers aren't necessarily like fun places to be, but the way that the neighborhood programs
yep.
do it they are fun places to be. Like they do specific like cool down and watch a movie and have a
Oh, wow.
popsicle, like they make it like more inviting, more community oriented, more community centered. They also do a lot of multilingual information. The city does do a lot of translation. We have 12 official top languages that we translate all of our most important information in, which includes heat. So we have a lot of, and then in the last, like, yeah, 5 years, we've done for 4 years, lots and lots and lots of translation. So that's something that goes out about just like how to stay cool, what the signs are, what to look out for, yeah, information like that. We've also recently partnered with an organization called Technology for Living,
Mm,
and they are a group that help folks with disabilities, particularly people with spinal cord injuries and other like mobility challenges. So last year, we were able to get a grant for them, and they bought folks cooling vests. So they're like a vest that you can have like ice packs in. And then they were like tested and things through the spinal cord, um, yeah, different spinal cord organizations to find like what were the best ones for people with folks with wheelchair who use
wow.
wheelchairs and stuff. And yeah, really, so we were able to hand out some of those. And then this year they used the money to get neck fans. So yeah, so they could do that. Yeah, so lots of different ways to, yeah, help people stay cool, like cheap and or
Mhm.
cheaper, and easier, like immediate actions.
Yes.
I would say like the city obviously is working on some other like longer term actions, but yeah, it's something that's happening now and is continuing to happen, and
Yeah.
yeah, needing some more immediate response.
Brilliant. Going back to your point about the fun projects or making community centers fun, it's it's really interesting to me whenever I we see these um, small improvements to whatever center it is. It really just revolves around creating like an interesting area or like a fun place to be or something that is like engaging for people. Like that
Totally.
is part of it.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
know, building community, but also
Hmm.
staying cool and making sure
Hmm.
that they can stay cool.
Yeah, I know they call this in like the social infrastructure world or the social connection world about like bumping spaces in your
Oh,
building, and like how can you create more, yeah, areas that like force people to kind of like slow down or stop or things, especially when a lot of buildings here, maybe this is going on a tangent now, but a problem that I have is that like you can only go to your floor and you
oh
like
yeah,
can't go to other people like other floors in your building, like those like security stuff, or people only go from like their car in the
mhm,
park, like in the parkade, like up to their build, like up to their floor, and they can't
yeah,
connect with other people, which I is like, this is the opposite of what we're trying to do. I mean, I don't have that problem in my three-story 1959 walk-up, but it is for other people. And I run into people in the laundry room all the time, and
yep.
it's a good place to check on people. But otherwise, yeah, that's where that isolation comes in, or
Well,
you don't
I
have those spaces. Yeah.
totally, and there's recent scholarship out of land use planning that talks about space actually if it's more inviting, you know, if there's higher floors or if it's brighter,
Yes.
whatever the attraction is, it can actually like make people more comfortable to like connect with one
Connect.
another.
Nice. I
And
love
the
that.
opposite is also true.
Oh
They
yeah.
did a bunch of research. I think it might have been out of like a few communities in the US where they reduced a lot of the hardened infrastructure that made it not a very nice place to walk by, and they found
Mhm.
that like violent crime and non-violent crime
Mm.
dropped. And it's
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Love
Yeah.
it. It's like it's almost like our infrastructure is really important and really
Yeah. Yeah.
goes to show how like quality of life, and yeah, and like day to day, but definitely in emergencies as well.
Yeah. Oh, totally right. I mean, I don't know if I said it on last episode's podcast, but I've been I've been telling people lately, like disasters are the test of our systems, and we're
Yes.
literally just studying until that point. We're just
Yes.
prepping until we get to that point, and then heat wave or whatever comes, and now it's time to see if we passed.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. So broad strokes, Vancouver is doing a lot to adapt. If you had to maybe fit it in like 60 seconds, like what's in your perspective the coolest project you are doing?
Ooh, I don't know if I can say the coolest project. I think, I mean, anything that we're doing with the resilient neighborhoods is so cool. It's
Mm,
really, so we do, at the beginning of every season a call. We hold a call with all of our partners to kind of give them an update about what is happening, or what's, maybe a forecast, new things that the city has done. So like new cooling centers or
mm,
new infrastructure, or whatever's happening, and new stuff that we've done in the last year. And then, but really it's about a time of finding out what everyone else is doing and what they're planning on. And it is so cool, like how creative they can be, that we can we cannot be that creative at the city. So it really, and that it is hard for me sometimes, being municipal government employee for so
mhm,
long, that we can be creative in some ways. But like one neighborhood house, they ended up crocheting a shade canopy, and they had like a local, they already had like a seniors like knitting and crochet group, and so then they got them to do, and then I think they ended up getting like a bunch of recycled material too to make the crochet shades, and they were able to put it up where this is something that my team and I have been wanting to do for so long, because we know that other places are doing
Yeah.
like, I think like Portugal, Barcelona, like they're doing really cool shade canopies, but like
Mm.
the bureaucracy of trying to do it at the city is ridiculous. So like, yeah, the fact that they can just do it on their own property is really cool. We connected with SunSafe BC. They're giving out
Mm.
free sunscreen dispensers, and I got
Amazing.
a name from someone, and they're like, "Yeah, we can do that." And we were able to give sunscreen dispensers to a bunch of our neighborhood groups as well.
Really.
A lot of really interesting work, especially with like equity denied populations that
Mm.
are just really touching and really like culturally sensitive and meaningful, and coming from the community, it's like, this is what we want to do and this is how we're going to do it, and we say that's awesome. Like,
That,
how can we help you, and work that would be really difficult for us to do but we love to see. So yeah, and some really interesting like climate justice work, and work like different youth, like yeah, like partnering with some of the youth climate folk like teams that they're trying to like get energized and work on different projects. And I think heat um, ends up being a good one, because it is something that we're seeing. I mean, it's not good that we're seeing it every year, but we're seeing it every year. And so it's like you can make a plan, do the plan, respond, okay, how did that work, and change it for next year in ways that um, we don't really see with a lot of other emergencies. And so I think it ends up being, it's like impactful and people can see that. Anyways, that was definitely over 60 seconds, and I
no, no, that
named
was
a lot more
perfect.
than one thing.
And you know what? Like heat is something that we will see progressively more of. And I
Yeah.
mean, you know, uh, as as Sarah said last episode, like what does like 2030, 2035 even look like for our daytime temperatures, but then our nighttime temperatures too, and
Yes.
how do our
Yeah.
systems handle that? Yeah, brilliant. Can't go too much on tangent though. I want to ask you two last questions.
Okay.
So, number one, in your view, what's the most effective, affordable home or personal adaptation piece that people can kind of incorporate or bring into their homes for heat waves?
Okay. Good question. I'm gonna cheat and say two things.
Perfect.
I mean, for any emergency, the cheapest thing that you can do is know who your neighbors are. So that to me is a big one, and I'm always going to say it no matter what the context is. And
Mhm.
again, shocks or stresses, knowing who your neighbors are, knowing who needs help and how to help them, is going to make you respond and recover from emergencies so much more easier than if you didn't have that. So that's big, and my kind of like all hazard approach answer. And then other than that, if we're talking about heat specifically, um, it's not the cheapest, but mechanical cooling.
Mm.
However, you can get mechanical cooling is life-saving and life-changing for a lot of different folks. But there are a lot of barriers to that, especially for people who rent, like myself, or even in stratas that don't allow air conditioning. Yeah, there's lots of things that are a lot of barriers in the way to that, which is really problematic.
Yeah.
So doing work to kind of get rid of those barriers from different levels. But if you can get it, that's what I would say to do. And if you have air conditioning, invite your neighbors over, invite your friends
Okay.
over. I'll put those two together. But there are a lot of like little things that like the health authority promotes to stay cool, like having a cool kit, like those that we send out.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
You can make those yourself. You can buy a lot of stuff from like a dollar store or thrift store things. Um, yeah, so that and staying informed. I'm just going on my whole list of things. Staying informed, the city puts out, and the city, the health authority, the province puts out lots and lots of information.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, a lot of our information is translated into the top 12 languages. So, like knowing where to get information, sharing that information with your neighbors, especially the ones that aren't online or don't realize that things are translated, and you can just print it out and give it to them. But yeah, my number one's always going to be being connected. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. That's brilliant. Okay, one last question.
Okay.
I've already taken this over time, and I mean,
No worries.
oh well, might as well go further.
We're here. Yeah.
So, if you had one key takeaway for listeners who have heard about heat waves, the science of it, so like a few examples, what would your overall key takeaway be? It could be positive, it could be like a little, like serious, however way you want to take it.
Mm. Oof. Yeah. I'm gonna say social connection again.
Mhm.
I'm gonna say that is gonna help us with so many of these other barriers that we have, that are really challenging. And like things like the right to cool
Mm.
and cooling in place, are things that I would love to see for everyone, and it's something that I want to see and would be really good if that's is happens sooner rather than later. um, but as we've discussed, there's a lot of systems in place that prevent some of these things from happening. So in an ideal world, everyone would just have mechanical cooling, and they would be connected with their neighbors, and everyone would be healthy and safe and happy and resilient. That's
Love
my
that.
wish. That's my wish for everyone. Yeah.
Get in contact with your neighbor, I think, is one of the best
Yes.
takeaways we can any
Yeah.
sort of practitioner can.
Yeah, with
Yeah,
your
they can walk.
neighbors. Yeah, with your local community group, with your
Mhm.
gardening club, with your bowling club,
Yep.
with
Your crocheting
your
club?
crochet
Come
club.
on.
Yeah, exactly. Um, there's way to build community and resilience, to emergencies and to heat waves that, maybe doesn't seem intuitive to the
Mhm.
average person. They think like, "Oh, I need to talk about heat." Specifically, I need to talk to my neighbors about heat. But you don't need to do that. You can kind of get through and get around it in lots of different ways, and meeting people where they're at as well. Yeah, I think like I've talked to lots of different groups, and like kids and dogs are really good ways
Yeah.
to meet other, parents and dog owners and pet owners. um but yeah, and gardening and bridge club or whatever you're doing is making you more resilient. Any way that you're connecting with people in your community and with your neighbors, and you just naturally like if you're talking to them, you're finding out about them, and then you'll be able to help them, or that they will help you in an
Oh,
emergency.
I love that. That's a good, hopeful message. Where can listeners ask you questions or get in contact with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn or I'm on Blue Sky. I don't post too much anymore in either of those places, but I am there if you want to find me, and under Sarah Hunn on both. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Sarah. Brilliant. I love what you guys are doing. Please keep doing it. Please keep encouraging people to connect with each other. I think that's going to be the way that saves us all. And I just want to take a moment to thank you for your consideration, some thoughtful and insightful answers. Really appreciated you coming on.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brady, for having me. I really